When Freddie Mercury died on the 24th of November, 1991, he left something behind in the recording studios. Not notes, not instructions, not a plan. He left his voice-specific recordings made across the final sessions in Montreux, fragments and completed passages, and the particular quality of a voice recorded in 1991 that was different from the same voice recorded in any earlier year. He left enough for an album, and Brian May, Roger Taylor, and John Deacon spent the next 4 years finishing it. Not releasing archive material, not assembling a tribute record from existing recordings. Finishing it, writing new music to accompany what Freddie had left, building the arrangements around his voice, doing what a band does in the recording studio, except that one of the 4 people who had always done this together was present only on tape. Brian May has described the process of making Made in Heaven as the hardest thing he has ever done. Not the most technically demanding, not the most creatively exhausting, though it was both of those. The hardest, the word is precise. 4 years of going to the studio and hearing Freddie Mercury's voice and working with it and building around it and doing the thing that needed to be done because Freddie had asked for it to be done and because the asking was the last thing that could be honored. The recordings that Freddie Mercury made in the final period of his life, primarily in 1991 at Mountain Studios in Montreux, the studio that Queen had purchased in 1978, were made in the specific conditions of someone who understood their timeline and who chose, in the face of that timeline, to keep working. He had said, "Write me things, bring me things, I will sing them." This instruction was the specific act of will of someone who understood that the alternative to working was not working, and who had decided that not working was not available. He came to the studio when he could. He recorded when his health permitted. He sang what was brought to him and what he could bring from himself. And when he died, what was on the tape was not the complete album. It was material, extraordinary material, given the conditions in which it was made. Fragments and passages and the specific quality of a voice that had been doing this for 3 years in conditions that would have silenced a lesser instrument. What made these recordings usable, what made them more than archive material, was the commitment inside them. Freddie Mercury in 1991 was recording for what would come after him. He knew this, and the knowledge was in the recordings. The specific quality of effort that a person brings to something when they understand it is among the last things they will do. When the ordinary professional calculation of whether a take is adequate enough has been replaced by the different calculation of whether the take contains everything that can be given. He gave everything. The recordings show this. The decision to finish Made in Heaven to complete an album, rather than simply release the recordings as they were, was a decision that required the surviving 3 members of Queen to return to the specific working relationship that Freddie Mercury's death had rendered incomplete. They had been a band of 4 people. One of the 4 was gone. What remained was the question of whether 3 people, working with the recorded voice of the 4th, was still Queen in any meaningful sense. Brian May and Roger Taylor concluded that it was, not identical to what the process had been, but the same in the most important sense, the fulfillment of what Freddie Mercury had asked for. And the fulfillment of a request from Freddie Mercury was, in the context of what they had lost, the closest available equivalent to the creative conversation that was no longer possible. He asked them to finish it. He said, "Bring me things, write me things, I will sing them. And when I am gone, you will finish what I could not finish." And they went to the studio for 4 years and they finished it. Every morning, the studio, the tape, the voice that had recorded these fragments in 1991, and that was not there anymore to say whether what was being built around it was what it would have wanted. They built it anyway, because he had asked, because the asking was the last thing that could be honored. The specific difficulty of the process has been described by Brian May in terms that illuminate what 4 years of this work actually required. He has spoken about the quality of going to the studio and hearing Freddie Mercury's voice in playback, the specific experience of a voice that is both completely familiar and completely absent. The recordings are not memory. They are Freddie Mercury's voice, recorded with the technical clarity of a professional studio, present in the speakers with a presence that is in some ways more complete than memory. And the person attached to the voice is not there. The specific experience Brian May has described is the experience of working with something that sounds like presence and is absence, the most precise form of grief that the recording studio can produce. He has called it the hardest thing he has ever done. Not the technical challenge, not the creative challenge, though both were real. The specific emotional reality of 4 years of a voice that should not have been there and was there every day in every session. The voice sounds exactly like Freddie Mercury because it is Freddie Mercury, not a reconstruction, not an approximation, but the actual voice recorded with the clinical clarity of a 1991 professional studio. And when you hear it in the speakers, it is completely present, completely his, and completely separate from the person it belongs to. Brian May has described this as the hardest part of the process, not the technical decisions, not the arrangement challenges, but the specific daily reality of hearing the voice and knowing it was the last of the voice, and that what was being built around it had to be worthy of that. Made in Heaven was the last Queen album. It was also the last thing John Deacon ever did as a musician. He participated in the making of the album, played the bass parts that the arrangements required, contributed what the album needed, and when it was done, he stopped. Not retired in the conventional sense of announcing a retirement. Simply stopped. He did not record again. He did not perform again. He did not participate in the subsequent Queen activities, the Queen plus Paul Rogers period, the Queen plus Adam Lambert period, any of it. The specific act of completing Made in Heaven, of going through 4 years of Freddie Mercury's voice in a studio and building the album around it was, for John Deacon, the completion of everything. He had honored the last request. And when the last request had been honored, there was nothing left for him to do. Brian May has said the door is always open. John Deacon has not walked through it. Made in Heaven was his ending. He made it complete. He left. The specific quality of the recordings Freddie Mercury left the quality that made Made in Heaven what it became, rather than simply an archive release, was the quality of someone who was singing with the full awareness of what the recordings were for. He knew in some form that what he was recording in 1991 was material that would be completed after he was gone. He had asked for this completion, and the recordings reflect a specific kind of effort, not the routine effort of a singer working through material in ordinary sessions, but the effort of someone who is giving what they have because what they have is finite, and because the giving of it is the specific form of continuing that is available. Brian May has described the 1991 recordings as extraordinary, not only in terms of the voice, which was Freddie Mercury's voice, and therefore extraordinary regardless of conditions, but in terms of what was inside the singing. The commitment, the completeness, the quality of someone who has understood what the recording is for and who is giving everything to it accordingly. He sang for what would come after. He recorded in 1991 knowing that Brian May and Roger Taylor and John Deacon would hear these recordings in 1992 and 1993 and 1994, and would build around them, and that the building would be the completion of what he could not complete himself. He gave them the material. They gave it 4 years. And the material he gave them was extraordinary because he was giving it for after, because the specific commitment of someone singing for what comes after them has a quality that ordinary professional commitment does not have. Made in Heaven was released on the 6th of November, 1995, 4 years and 12 days after Freddie Mercury died. It reached #1 in the United Kingdom, in Germany, in Austria, and Switzerland, in Australia. It sold millions of copies across the world. It was received by people who had been waiting for it with the specific quality of attention that people give to the last work of someone they loved, not the ordinary critical attention of a new release, but the specific attention of people who understood that what they were holding was the last thing. The last thing Freddie Mercury would ever be part of. The last Queen album. The fulfillment of the last request. It reached #1 in the United Kingdom and in multiple other countries. The title track, Mother Love, the song Freddie Mercury had begun and Brian May had finished, is the song that most completely contains what the album is. Freddie Mercury singing the verses, Brian May's voice replacing his for the final verse, the two voices present in the same song across the boundary of the death that separated them. made in heaven. The last wish honored. The last collaboration complete. And John Deacon played his final bass notes and put down the instrument, and the album was done, and he was done, and he did not come back. Brian May has returned to the description of Made in Heaven as the hardest thing he has ever done across multiple interviews, across multiple years. The consistency of the description, the same word, hardest, returned to again and again, suggests that it is not a casual characterization, but a considered one. Hard in the specific sense of requiring the most complete expenditure of what he had, including things he did not know were available to be spent. The emotional resources required to go to the studio every day for 4 years and hear the voice that had driven him to Hammersmith Bridge and build around it and make it into something complete, and honoring those resources are not the resources of ordinary professional effort. They are the resources of someone who loved the person whose voice was in the tape and who was spending that love in the specific form of the work. He was 44 to 48 years old during the making of it. He had been in the band for 25 years. He had done extraordinary things. The hardest was this, the hardest thing he has ever done. 4 years, every morning, the studio, the tape, the voice, building around the voice, not being able to ask the voice whether what was being built was right, not being able to play the results to the person whose voice was in the speakers and receive a response, finishing what was asked to be finished for the person who asked, who was not there to see it finished. The hardest thing, Made in Heaven, released November 6, 1995. Number 1. 4 years of the hardest thing. Made in Heaven has become, in the 30 years since its release, the specific form in which many people encounter the Queen of the final years. The Queen making music in the conditions available, honoring what remained to be honored. For listeners who came to Queen through the Bohemian Rhapsody film or the classic catalog, Made in Heaven is the end of the story. The album made after the story ended, by the people who lived it, from the voice that asked for the ending to be this. It is not the best Queen album. It is the most complete statement of what Queen was in its final form, the most complete expression of the specific love that made the band what it was across 20 years. Brian May spent 4 years making it. He said it was the hardest thing he had ever done. He was right, and it was worth it, because the last request deserved the hardest work. 4 years, the hardest thing he ever did. Every session, the voice in the speakers, the voice that was not there, building around it. John Deacon playing the bass and then leaving and never coming back because the doing of it was the end of everything for him. Roger Taylor drumming and carrying his own version of the weight. Brian May saying it was the hardest thing. And on November 6th, 1995, the album was in the shops. Number 1, The Last Wish, honored. The last collaboration, complete. Made in Heaven, because he asked, because they answered. Freddie Mercury died on the 24th of November, 1991. He left recordings. He left the last request. Brian May and Roger Taylor and John Deacon spent 4 years answering it. They went to the studio every morning and heard his voice in the speakers and built around it with the most complete care and commitment that 4 years of the hardest thing they had ever done could produce. And on the 6th of November, 1995, Made in Heaven was released. It went to number 1. And John Deacon finished the last bass track and put down his instrument and never picked it up again in public. Because for him, the last request and its honoring was the complete thing. And when the complete thing was done, there was nothing left to add. And Brian May carried the weight of the 4 years into every subsequent stage, every concert, every performance, every night when Freddie Mercury's voice played through the speakers. Made in Heaven, the hardest thing, worth everything it cost.